one of the things my wife and I like to joke about is when we drive around Atlanta, and I listen to pretty much talk radio constantly because I don't care for a lot of music today. You can hear so many commercials for ways to treat ED over and over.
Yeah.
And I've told Allie several times, the reasons those commercials exist so much now is because of the pornography industry.
Yeah.
There are so many guys that have been training their brain in ways they don't realize with fake women. They can't respond to real ones anymore.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of The Naked Gospel. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today we are joined by Nick Peters. Nick Peters is a man after my own heart. He's a nerd through and through, apologetics nerd. He's a gamer. He's a big reader. We had his wife on a few months ago, Allie Peters. She shared her story with us. Nick is on today sharing his story. It's a unique one. In all my years of doing integrity ministry, I've only ever met two people who haven't watched porn. And Nick happens to be one of them. So super thrilled just to process what that's been like for him, his journey through that, and how that's impacted his marriage. So thank you for joining us today, and let's jump right in. All right, Nick, thank you so much for being on today, man. I am really excited for this conversation. I've gotten to know you to some extent over the last few months. Your wife was on not too long ago, and I think her podcast is still like our fifth top viewed podcast in our history. There's just something about her vulnerability and her story that is just striking to people. So just really glad to be able to have her husband on today. So thanks for joining us, man.
Glad to be here.
Nick, would you mind just taking a minute before we jump into the real kind of content of this conversation? Would you mind just telling our audience some about yourself? Obviously, I know who you are, but they don't. Would you mind just sharing?
Yeah, I'm Nick Peters. I live in Cumming, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. I host the Deeper Waters Apologetics podcast, and I have a website, deeperwatersapologetics.com. Due to turn 40 this month, please send gifts. And I have Aspergers. I've been married for 10 years to my wife, Allie. We have a cat named Shiro. In my spare time, when I'm not doing things related to apologetics, I'm a very avid gamer.
Very cool. Have you been gaming out on anything particular recently?
Animal Crossing is something that I started playing because of my wife. I still do some Pokemon every day.
Nice.
I play Final Fantasy Brave Exvius on my phone every day, along with Dr. Mario and Words with Friends. And of course, in addition to all that, I affirm the virgin birth.
Of course. I dig it, man. I like it a lot. Nick, I mentioned this before. I've only met two guys who have never watched pornography before. Their wives are the only people that they've ever seen naked, and you happen to be one of them, which I don't mean for that to sound crass. Like, that is a marvel. Like, that is extraordinary, because I've been working on sexual integrity for nearly 4 years now, when it comes to nonprofits and mission organizations and whatnot, and I've only ever met two. So I'm just really thrilled to have you on. I was wondering if you could just walk us through maybe some of your childhood up till your marriage. Just share some of your story with us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes a guy still does see women like that. I mean, but not in the context of porn. Like, for instance, I remember watching Schindler's List when I was in high school, and there's nudity in that one. But for me, I grew up in a Christian home my life, and I became a Christian on my own at the age of 11. And not too long ago, my wife shared on Facebook about what's something that you did when you were in school that you got in trouble for. And I said, honestly, nothing. Nothing. Did not get in trouble throughout school, because I'm the kind of like guy that, dots every I, crosses every T, follows the rules very specifically. I hate anytime I do anything that can get me even in a way that seems remotely in trouble with someone. And so, honestly, pornography never was an issue for me then. never was appearing. I don't know where I would have gone even to get it growing up. And where I didn't have trouble with with sex growing up too much, and could also be because my Aspergers, I didn't really ask a lot of girls out either. And now, if you want to get to how I got married, then I was getting off work one day when I lived in Charlotte and getting ready to come home, and I remember Gary Habermas was going to be teaching a module at Southern Evangelical Seminary where I was a student at the time. Now, I had met him once before when he came to our church, so I thought I'll drop by and see him. And I meet him in the main lobby for about an hour or so before class, and he says, "Hey, Nick, you know who Mike Lacona is?" I say, "Yeah, of course I do. He's kind of your protege. He debated Bart Ehrman here. You wrote a book with him, Case of the Resurrection of Jesus. Did you know he has a daughter?" "No, I didn't know that." "Yeah, he does, and we were talking about her with me and some of the other guys here, and about how she's going through a hard time, and I brought that she has Aspergers, and Frank Turek said, well, Nick Peters has Aspergers, and he asked me if I'd like to get in touch with her, talk with her, and that was in August of 2009, and I'd gone down the road of internet dating before. I decided I didn't want to go down that road. She was wanting to get back in touch with her ex and reunite things with him. We came from conclusion and started talking. No dating. We're friends. That's it. We were married July 24th, 2010.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. 10 years. That's no small number. That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations there. I wanted to ask you, this is a difficult question, and I just want you to take a stab at it because it's a question of contrast. So I'm curious to know if you're able to identify differences between yourself and maybe others because you haven't watched porn. Of course, like nudity and porn are two very different things. It's a different thing to see Schindler's List versus something that's pornographic. There's nothing pornographic about Schindler's List. So when it comes to like even just kind of analyzing or looking at, because the closest I can kind of get to that is noticing how my imagination and my rationale function when I'm watching porn versus when I don't. And when I'm not watching porn, there's more vitality and more breadth to my imagination. There's more compassion and passion towards the community and the people around me. There's just greater breadth and depth to my identity, and I'm able to give more. But that's just me evaluating myself. I can't even appreciate what it's like to maybe evaluate the culture or the people around you, knowing that you haven't watched porn, but most people do. What's your view on that? And how do you, I'd just be interested for you to crack that open a little bit.
Well, it's pretty hard to say since you can't really speak about what you haven't done too well. I can say I could probably struggle with lust in the same way many guys do. I mean, you see a woman, you know her, she's a woman pretty much immediately. But my mind always goes back to my wedding vows and my promises that I've made. And there's really no competition at all out there in beauty. I mean, I can think another girl might be nice to look at from time to time, but they're not someone I want to spend my life with. It's certainly not based on just the principle of, oh, geez, they look good.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder about this corollary that we seem to think that if someone is especially good looking, they must be very good in the bedroom. I don't know if there's been anything to establish anything like that. And I think it doesn't depend so much on looks, it just depends on the person.
No, that's helpful. Nick, to double click on that a little bit, you talk about being married, it doesn't like looks and ability or performance, like we correlate those things, and it's kind of a ridiculous thing that we do. There have been like a lot of people who have pointed out that we've made sex almost like an Olympic game, you know, where it's all about performance and none of it's about vulnerability or intimacy. So even like our perspective on sex is just kind of jacked up there. I'd be curious, well, not just curious, like sincerely interested, because I imagine some people who are listening are in this situation. Like your wife shared her story with us, and she like started watching porn when she was very young. And I'd just be interested to hear, because that's kind of like the inverse of most situations where like maybe there's more women who haven't watched porn, but a lot of guys who do. And so then the women trying to figure out how to engage in intimacy with their significant other, not just physically but also emotionally. But for you it's been inverted, where like she's watched porn and she's gone through this stuff but you haven't. So like what has that been like for you guys to wrestle through and journey through?
I'd say possibly I have a more positive view of sexuality, because me as a theologian, I also look at sex from a very theological perspective. Because nothing God does is by accident. And when he creates this system, he creates it with purpose and intention. Sex is meant to show something about him. Marriage is meant to show something about him. And I see it that way. I have never ceased to see it as a gift. I don't understand guys who just don't seem to appreciate the fact they have a woman in their lives. I've often told women, like, women, if you want to get a husband who is devoted to you, don't marry a jock most of the time. Marry a nerd. Nerds are super devoted.
It's sound counsel. I like it a lot, and I appreciate you letting me ask the question, because that's it's a sensitive question. I'm just asking. It's a question of asking to be transparent there, and I appreciate it. You bringing us into your marriage a bit. I'd be curious to know how has it been? I mean, so being present to your wife in her own struggle, like what does that look like for you? What kind of like call of faithfulness, and I'd just be interested to peer into that a little bit when it comes to walking with your spouse through those kinds of things.
What kinds of things exactly?
So like if she has, because I'm only able to say this because Allie shared her story with us. So like when she has like the abuse and she has the pornography, and so like you guys practicing intimacy together, because like as you say, like there is this theological ideal, but then there's also this relational synergy where you guys have to grow in intimacy, and again not just physically but also just relationally. What does that look like for you guys in particular?
I think it's just more trying to move at a pace that both of us are safe and comfortable with. And her struggles with borderline personality disorder can make that harder at times. But I always keep coming back to the phrase, as Christ loved the church. And that is a very radical phrase. And I tell guys who are married or are thinking about marriage, say, if you hear that saying, you don't have like a chill run down your spine or something like that when you hear it, you're not thinking about it enough.
No, that's helpful. As Christ loved the church. Can you, this is where your theological nerddom might come into play. When you contend with that passage in particular, what are some of the things that you extract from it, and what are some of the ways that you then apply it?
You know, when I can seem to doubt who I am to her, sometimes I can picture going to God and saying, you know, Lord, I don't understand. I've given her so much. I've loved her so much. I've cherished her so much. I've done all that I can. I don't understand why she just doesn't know immediately my great love for her and celebrate it. And I could hypothetically picture this voice saying back to me, hey, bonehead, I've been asking you that for a few decades now. Yeah.
That's where the challenge comes into play, isn't it? That's really beautiful, though, because it's good to see God that way, to hear Jesus say that. It's like, no, buddy, like now you know what it feels like to be me, right? Which is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. It's been said that when you get married, it's that God puts this mirror in front of you and says, "Hey, bozo, this is what you're really like."
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think it's true. So I'd be curious. There are a few. I'll ask this question a couple different ways because I think it's important. So when it comes to just like counseling others, like obviously, a lot of people around both of us watch pornography. A lot of people in our churches, a lot of people in our relationships.
Yeah.
So when it comes to just counseling others or being present to others, how do you go about doing that as someone who hasn't watched porn? Obviously, a lot of people say you have to have gone through something to be able to speak into it, and I just don't think that's true.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of people who haven't used heroin who help heroin addicts out of their struggles. You know, like you don't have to be a recovering addict to be able to speak into that. So how do you, whether theologically or practically or maybe even both, like how do you approach that?
I think first off, pornography, there has to be zero tolerance whatsoever. You can't make exceptions. Of course, if you stumble, you have to be willing to accept forgiveness and forgive yourself. And if you're married or dating, you should be open with that person in your life and tell them what's going on. So you need to be able to do everything you can to fight this battle. Programs like Celebrate Recovery, I think, can be exceptionally helpful.
Yeah.
Get a web browser like XXX Church or Covenant Eyes.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And think about the consequences. And one of the things my wife and I like to joke about is when we drive around Atlanta, and I listen to pretty much talk radio constantly because I don't care for a lot of music today. You can hear so many commercials for ways to treat ED over and over.
Yeah.
And I've told Allie several times, the reasons those commercials exist so much now is because of the pornography industry.
Yeah.
There are so many guys that have been training their brain in ways they don't realize with fake women. They can't respond to real ones anymore.
Nick, when you talk about a zero tolerance for pornography, a lot of people rationalize the existence of pornography in their life. Would you mind playing out your thoughts on a zero tolerance? Because a lot of people would be like, well, like, you know, like I'm mitigating the issue. Like it's, you know, it's happening maybe less, or I only do it like once or twice a week or once or twice a month. When you kind of lay down that hard line of a zero tolerance, can you explain kind of your reasoning behind that?
Where it's good to cut back, but I don't want to give anyone any sort of foothold for more. I mean, you wouldn't want to say, well, I'm only shooting drugs one day a week now.
Right.
That's still doing damage to you. And every single time it damages your soul more and more. And you definitely need to get some like an accountability partner to do this with. Someone that will hold you accountable. Greg Coker, remember years ago, talk about being at a gas station, like seeing the accountability partner thing, and said, yeah, and I saw that magazine rack behind the counter. You guys know which one. And saying, yeah, if I get one of those, I'm going to have to be on my phone in about 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And I think he's even said if he goes to a hotel and he's in his room and they have these X-rated channels, he calls immediately and has them removed for his room.
Yeah, that's commendable. That's really cool.
One of the biggest mistakes I think you can make in any area like this is if you go in and you think, I can handle this, I can avoid temptation. One of my sayings is one of the surest ways that you can be sure you're going to fall for temptation is you think you can't fall for it.
If anyone thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no one who's married, I mean, very few people will wake up and say, you know, I think today I have an affair and ruin my marriage. But what happens is they're at work and they're going on break, and hey, that girl that works with them, they're going on break at the same time. Hey, let's just go out and just have a meal together. We're just friends. That's all it is. It's not a big deal. Then a month later, they're meeting in a hotel room.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost an expectation of anything remotely relational.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read too many stories about people who do like Tinder dates or whatever, and like the women saying, "I didn't expect to have sex tonight," and the guy's like, "Well, like he's thinking in his head, like, well, of course you did, like it's gonna happen," and like they don't ever talk again. It's just a one night stand that happens because people are bored and want intimacy.
Yeah, I remember Kathy Bates, the actress, once said something about the whole Me Too movement. She said, "Back in my day, when someone asked you to come to their room, we always knew what it was for." And the thing is, guys and women approach the issue of sexuality very differently. Guys are much more prone to be less emotionally invested. Girls aren't, and I'm sorry, you cannot shut off that part of you automatically unless you just radically cure your soul.
Yeah.
And we've just got such a consumer mentality to sex that we've turned the whole nation into a giant Hayden Ashbury.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy Pearcey has talked about kind of a dualism that we practice. As though we're just physical bodies and we can orient our emotions however we want, that's not a real part of who we are.
Yeah.
Or that's the biggest part of who we are and our bodies don't matter at all. And so the dualism can swing both ways, and either way, your body's being exploited.
Yeah, but for most people are thinking of secular minds that go with the idea the world doesn't, that the immaterial aspect of man, it either doesn't exist or it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And most people in the church think that the material aspect is shallow and worldly.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be wrong if you married someone because you want to have sex. Now, if you married them just because you want to have sex, yeah, I'd agree that'd be wrong. But heck, even Paul says, it's better to marry than to burn with passion.
Yeah.
And when you look at women in the Bible, one of the things that's usually stressed so often is how beautiful they are. Esther, known for her beauty. Ruth dressed herself real good so she could go in and impress Boaz. Abigail, beautiful and wise. Job's daughters, nowhere in all the land could women be found more beautiful than Job's daughters. Beauty, and to me, this is when you get back to the creation narrative, the woman is the last creation of God. And I think it's because God decided to make his crowning achievement in beauty be the woman, because even women will agree that women are more beautiful than men are.
It is true. Yeah, I know plenty of women who are heterosexual who would say that the female form is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas I know plenty of guys who are heterosexual and they wouldn't look at the male form and be like, like, that's beautiful. So there is a difference there. And the female form is completely unique. I like the idea there of God saving the best for last there with creation. That's good.
When we read about creation being good, there's also an element in that of creation being beautiful. And beauty is meant to show the love of God. There's this strange notion we have today, even in the church, where we say beauty is in the eye of a beholder. That is anti-Christian nonsense. Whenever I meet someone who says beauty is subjective, there's no objective component to it, I say, okay, is your wife beautiful, or is that just your opinion? Because, I could draw a stick figure right now and hold it up, and if I ask you which is more beautiful, that or the Mona Lisa, that's a no-brainer. It's definitely the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, no, that's worth pointing out that we are all, we love flowers. We don't love, like weeds in particular. Like we are drawn to beauty, like color is vivid. Like if color didn't exist, or if somebody was going to come up to me and say, would you rather live with color or without color? I wouldn't say, well, it's like in the eye of the beholder. It's like, no, anybody and everyone wants color, in their life. And so there are objective, beautiful things, and we all acknowledge them, but it's almost like because they're acknowledged, we don't.
G.K. Chesterton once said that he would explain the problem of evil to the skeptic when they explain the problem of pleasure to him. I mean, we have to live in a world, but God could just as easily create a monochrome black and white world. He created one with color. We have to eat and we have to drink. It didn't mean food and water and things like that had to taste good. The human race has to reproduce. It doesn't mean sex had to be fabulously awesome for us to do it. God did all of these. And I've started, I'm an avid gamer. I remember years ago when the Super Nintendo was coming out, you have the commercials about it. And one thing it said was 32,000 colors. God made every single one of them, or at least the means for every single one of those colors.
Yeah, I think go along with your point, because you started in Genesis with creation being intentional, creation being beautiful. A lot of work's been done to show that, like, even the dualism of, like, our bodies die, but our spirits will live on in eternity. It's kind of been pushed against with the idea that, no, like, there's a new heavens and a new earth. You know, that we have a resurrected body, that Jesus was resurrected in a body, you know, and that we will be able to know him and explore creation for eternity.
And the final creation is described as a wedding. And really, what is more beautiful than a wedding like that? I mean, the material world is not an accident. God created it for us to live in. And it wasn't the case that man screws up and God says, oh, well, that was a nice dream. I guess we have to move on to plan B. No, plan A is still for an effect.
Yeah, no, I love all of that, Nick. And I think it's a message that a lot of people need. I need it because a lot of times I can push against, I can be, because people really just are kind of isolationists, you know. We try and live in other worlds, whether it's YouTube or whatever, and learning to inhabit this world well and learning to see the beauty in it is a practice. And for whatever reason, we stray away from it. I think it's probably because we stray away from our own pain or being present to ourselves, our own loneliness. But I think that's just where the good news comes into play.
We are rabid individualists today, and sadly that makes sex worse for all of us when you think about it, because sex becomes not a way to connect with another person on a deep emotional and intimate level, but a way to get our own needs met. And I think there's something fascinating. There was an episode of The Big Bang Theory where some of the guys are talking to Sharon about getting Howard over for a game night, and Leonard says, okay, Sharon, think about this. You're asking Howard to choose between Halo 3 and sex. And Sharon talks about all the things in Halo 3 and says, yes, sex just has, you know, nudity, passion, and for human contact. And one of the things I think about is that, you know, it's amazing. All the technology, all the wonders we've invented in this world, we still can't top God's idea of sex as the most awesome thing we do together.
Nick, that's as beautiful a point to end on as any other. I really love the relationship that you and your wife have with each other. Really grateful that you both would be on this podcast with me. Your wife is extraordinarily brave. I've really enjoyed my time with Allie, and I just really appreciate the way you cherish her. You cherish her life really well. And even in conversations long before I even did a podcast with her, that was always evident in your speech, the way you strove to honor her. So I really appreciate your marriage, and just really thankful that you've been on with us today. Yeah.
Well, it's always good to be on and talk about topics related to theology and sexuality and things like that.
Yeah, very much so, man. So, Nick, you're super active. How can people get plugged in with what you do and track with you?
Well, the best place to find me is deeperwatersapologetics.com. That's my website. I write a blog 5 days a week. I try to do a podcast once a week. I know I need to get back into doing YouTube videos again. I am on Facebook. I mean, you can find me on a few debates I've done on YouTube. The most recent one was about a year and a half ago. I debated Dan Barker live at the University of North Georgia, Gainesville, on the existence of God. I've done interviews with Trinity Radio and other places. So Yeah, I'm out there.
Yeah, you're all over the place, aren't you? And Nick,
And I affirm by virgin birth.
yes, yes, you do, all the time. How I like to ask people who are on the podcast with me, for my sake and for the viewers' sake, how can we just be praying for you? Is there a prayer request that you'd be willing to share with us?
Well, I know Allie's going through a hard time now. A lot of things I don't really want to get into.
Of course.
And so I pray for her well-being and for mine in this as well.
Okay. Yeah. Nick, thank you again just for being on with us, man.
Thank you for having me.
For sure.
And I affirm by virgin birth.
Yes. For the third time. I like it, man. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We've been hanging out with Nick Peters. Really extraordinary to come across somebody who hasn't watched porn. Again, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, for several years, and I've only ever met two. So yeah, I think there's just a lot to learn from his story. If you know somebody who would benefit from his story, please share it. Also go back and check out Allie's story. It really is incredible. She is just so very brave in the way she shares it. So thank you for tracking with us. Thank you for supporting us, and we'll see you guys next time.